This presentation is about editing capitalization. We can categorize editing capitalization into two main categories: names and terms and titles of works. First, names and terms. Obviously, personal names need capitalization, and when the personal name involves initials, you put spaces between the letters except when the initials are used alone, such as MFK Fisher, but LBJ. Names with particles. Now, these particles are things like the letter and the apostrophe that are sometimes found in names, or de la, for example, or Vaughn. When the surname is used alone, retain that particle, capitalize or lowercase it according to the way the person uses it, and space it as a name. Alphonse D'Amato, but Walter de la Mare. Notice the spacing being different in these cases depending on the person. Check a biographical dictionary or other source if you need to check for these sorts of situations. For extended names that involve hyphenations or extensions, retain and capitalize each element according to how the person does it. Victoria Sackville West, Ludwig von Mises, or Mises, just depends on the way the usage works and the way the capitalization works for that person. For titles and offices such as president, generally you can capitalize it when they're part of the name, but if it's a general reference, you do not. For example, the way these are treated here. There are some exceptions to this when referring to titles and offices, and this involves when it's in a promotional material, as in this example, where Director of International Sales is capitalized based off where it was found. For epithets or bynames, like the Great Emancipator in reference to Lincoln, the is not capitalized. When talking about kinship names, they generally are lowercased unless they precede a personal name or are used alone in place of that personal name. So my father and mother, not capped. Aunt Maud is capped, and let's go dad, and dad being a replacement for the personal name. These are capitalized. For ethnic and national groups, capitalize them. For sexual orientation and gender identities, Chicago recommends lowercasing them. For generations, lowercase them. For continents, countries, cities, oceans, and such, capitalize them, including when they're in adjective form, such as Atlantic Ocean or Californian. For points on a compass, lowercase them, including when you're using them as an adjective, north, northern, and so on. For regions of the world, capitalize them, including when they're in adjective form, Central America, Central American, and so forth. But lowercase general references to regions, Central Texas, Eastern Texas. Of course, we have a special case for West Texas because it's gotten its own sort of proper form, but perhaps some could argue things like Central Texas or Eastern Texas. East Texas, for example, might be capped. So it always is in reference to how people use it. For popular names or epithets, such as the Eternal City, the Loop in reference to Chicago, the Badlands, capitalize them. For urban areas, simply lowercase them unless they're official names, like Greater London. For political divisions, capitalize them when they follow a name or are accepted as part of a name. The Ottoman Empire, the United Kingdom, but in general reference, empire and kingdom are not capped. For government entities, capitalize them when they're used as part of the name. City of Chicago ordinance, but easy access to the city of Chicago. So it just depends of whether you're referencing it as a name or not. And that's how you can decide for capitalization. For mountains and rivers, capitalize them unless you're generally talking about the pond, the lake, or the mountain. For thoroughfares and basically streets and the like, you do capitalize them. So here's some streets, but if you're just going to say street, interstate, or lane, you do not. For buildings and monuments, capitalize them unless you're just talking about building or colossus or mosque. For words derived from proper names, capitalize them, but there are exceptions: Baudelairian, Bayesian, Dickensian, but Arabic numerals, Brussels sprouts, French fries, just happens to be how proper the word is being used. For legislative and deliberative bodies, capitalize them, unless you're referencing them generally, as an assembly and council. For administrative bodies, capitalize them, of course, unless you're referencing them generally, bureau or department. For judicial bodies, capitalize them unless referencing them generally, like just court. For government entities, though, you do lowercase them, administration, federal government, and so on. But if you say the United States federal government, then you would capitalize it in that case. So it really is an issue of proper versus general use. For organizations and parties, capitalize them unless referencing them generally. And this is where things mix up a bit. I know much of that could be summed up in capitalize them when it's proper and not when it's general, but in this case there are some more things to think about. For corporate names with unusual capitalization, you have to pay attention to how the company does it, like eBay or HarperCollins. But sometimes the editor may need to make a correction. For example, Adidas doesn't refer to itself in capitalized form, but it would probably be better to capitalize it when talking about it in print. For associations and the unions, capitalize them unless generally referencing them, and pay attention, of course, to brands and trademarks. You would capitalize them, Coca-Cola, Google, Kleenex, but if you're just saying cola, search engine, or tissue, you wouldn't. And pay attention to special spellings like iTunes, PowerPoint, or AccuWeather. For applications, operating systems, and devices, you capitalize them unless referencing them to the technology generally, like desktop computer or browser. And then there are lots of special cases depending on the context the editor is dealing with. For history and culture, for religion, military and vehicles, for scientific terminology, and often you just have to consult some even more specific manuals for these special cases where there's more to be said about how to do it. Now for titles of works. Now let's pay attention to sentence style capitalization. For sentence style capitalization, you capitalize only the first word in the title and the subtitle and any proper names, but everything else is lowercased. Famously, perhaps, APA follows sentence style capitalization in the references, so only the first letter of the title and the subtitle and any proper names is capitalized, but everything else is lowercased. Probably what you're more used to and maybe what comes more natural to you is the headline style, in which you capitalize the first and last words in the titles and subtitles and all other major words, and the only exceptions are articles, prepositions, or coordinating conjunctions. And of course, Chicago has much more to say about some special cases, as you can see here. For books and periodicals, capitalize them and then consult these sections for special cases. The same thing for articles inside the periodicals, and for parts of a book, capitalize them, but there are some special cases. And for all other works, generally you're going to almost always capitalize them. And some are italicized, but some are placed in quotations. So it's a matter of consulting it when you come across them. And that's editing capitalization. Consult these lecture slides as a cheat sheet, but as you can sense from this case, you might have to actually go to Chicago for some special